Forget the tidy image of a U-boat. A steel tube, German weapons on the racks, everything standardized. The war at sea didn't work like that. Pistols went missing. Boarding parties grabbed whatever was close. Ammunition turned up in odd calibers. And what fit in a cramped control room mattered more than what a manual preferred. Captured gear wasn't a trophy. It was a tool. Sometimes it solved a problem. Sometimes it created a new one. These are the 7 forgotten enemy weapons used by German U-boat crews. Number 7. Webley revolvers. British firearms in German hands. Officially, U-boat sidearms were supposed to be German-issue pistols like the P.08 or P.38 when available, with ammunition that matched Kriegsmarine supply. A submarine's armory was meant to be predictable. One caliber, one manual, no surprises when you're sealing hatches and diving fast. But captures made the rules blurry. Boarding teams and prize crews sometimes came back with British Webley revolvers, especially from merchant ships that carried armed guards or from lifeboats and abandoned gear. The appeal was simple. A big, blunt revolver is hard to misunderstand. It doesn't mind grime. It doesn't demand perfect magazines. In a narrow passageway, that mattered. The downside was logistics. Webleys meant .455 or 38-200s depending on model, and that ammunition wasn't on a German submarine standard list. If you had a Webley and no cartridges, you had dead weight. In a few documented capture inventories, the revolver shows up without a matching stock of ammunition useful only until the first reload. Still, when a boarding party expected a brief, close encounter, a simple captured revolver could be a rational choice. Number 6. Sten guns. A common British submachine gun turned against its makers. German doctrine for surface actions leaned on deck guns early in the war and on mounted anti-aircraft weapons later, not on handing out submachine guns like an infantry platoon. Space was limited, ammunition was rationed, and any weapon brought aboard had to justify itself in salt, spray, and cramped compartments. Yet the Sten was the kind of enemy weapon that could slip into that logic. It was compact, simple, and built around 9x19mm an ammunition type the Germans already produced in huge quantities. If a U-boat took Stens from a captured ship's armed party or from British coastal stocks during special operations, the weapon could be fed without adding a new caliber to the boat. The problem was that simplicity cuts both ways. Stens could be reliable enough, but they were also notorious for accidental discharges if handled badly, and their magazines were a common failure point in real-world use. A Sten that fired smoothly in a boarding drill could become a liability on a wet deck at night, where one slip or one dented magazine turned extra firepower into noise and confusion. Number 5. Lee-Enfield rifles. Standard British rifles as U-boat surface defense. Regulations expected a submarine's small arms to be secondary useful for guard duty, boarding, and the occasional surface emergency. The boat's real weapons were torpedoes, and later the anti-aircraft mounts that proliferated as air threats grew in 1942–44. Rifles were supposed to be few, standardized, and fed by known ammunition stocks. A captured Lee-Enfield disrupted that neat plan, but it also offered something practical. Fast, accurate bolt-action fire with a generous magazine. If you were on the surface and had to put rounds into a small target warning shots, cutting down a line, discouraging a stubborn radio operator on a ship you were stopping, the Enfield sights and handling could feel civilized compared to whatever mixed-condition rifles were available. Then the bill came due. .303 British was not a routine U-boat supply item. Captured ammunition might be plentiful after one boarding, and gone after the next. There's also the identification risk. British caliber brass and British rifles on a German deck could confuse a post-action analysis, or create uncomfortable questions if prisoners later reported what they saw. Practical in the moment, awkward in the long war. If you were the officer of the watch and you had one rifle slot to fill, would you choose standardized supply or the gun that shoots best right now? Number 4. Captured flare pistols. Signaling surprise and deception at sea. Signal procedure at sea was supposed to be controlled and unambiguous. The Kriegsmarine used prescribed signal flags, lamps, and pyrotechnics so friendly units could interpret messages quickly, even under stress. A flare wasn't just a flare. It was part of a code color, pattern, timing, and context. Captured flare pistols tempted crews anyway. They were compact, easy to stash, and if you'd taken a box of cartridges with them, you now had a second signaling vocabulary. That could be useful in deception. A boat operating on the surface at night could, in theory, imitate distress signals or merchant ship routines long enough to close distance. It could also reduce suspicion during the messy moments after a boarding, when you wanted a light but didn't want to advertise German naval flare to anyone watching. But pyrotechnics are not subtle. A flare can betray position as efficiently as it illuminates a target. And mismatched cartridges and pistols were a real hazard. Wrong ammunition can rupture or misfire. And that's not an abstract problem when you're holding it at arm's length on a pitching deck. A captured flare pistol could buy seconds of clarity. It could also buy the enemy your coordinates. Before we move on, if you're on a U-boat in 1942, what do you prioritize? A weapon you can always resupply, or the captured one that works better in your hands? Tell us below, and subscribe because the top 3 get much messier than firearms. Number 3. Signal gear and communication devices. Information is a weapon until it betrays you. Kriegsmarine procedure treated signaling as disciplined, centralized work. Lamps, flags, and radios weren't personal kit. They were controlled tools tied to recognition codes, call signs, and schedules. Enemy equipment wasn't just different. It could transmit on the wrong frequencies, use unfamiliar connectors, and invite mistakes at the exact moment you can't afford them. And yet, boarded ships and raided stations offered prizes more valuable than another rifle. Binoculars with reticles, merchant radios, signal lamps, even codebooks and charts. Crews used captured gear to listen, not just talk. A receiver that could monitor civilian traffic might give you convoy hints, weather, routing small fragments that add up. In some cases, a captured lamp or Aldous-style searchlight could help you mimic the surface habits of a merchantman long enough to reduce suspicion. But the risk was built in. Use an enemy radio set to transmit, and you may light up direction-finding networks. Use the wrong lamp pattern, and you advertise yourself as an imposter. It could work quietly gathering traffic without firing a shot. It could also fail one wrong transmission, and aircraft arrive with a timetable. Number 2. Boarded ship machine guns. Heavy firepower that doesn't belong on a submarine. Submarines weren't supposed to become floating arsenals. Officially, deck armament was standardized naval mounts, approved ammunition, trained crews, and stowage that wouldn't turn a narrow walkway into a trap. Anything extra added weight, clutter, and new failure points in saltwater. But boarded vessels sometimes carried machine guns. Lewis guns, Vickers variants, Browning types, even improvised defensive mounts on merchants. If a U-boat had to stay on the surface finishing off a damaged ship, discouraging a stubborn crew, or covering a boarding party dragging a captured gun aboard could feel like buying insurance. Sometimes the ammunition came with it, boxed and ready. Sometimes the gun itself fit a niche. Higher rate of fire than a rifle. More reach than a pistol. Faster intimidation than a warning shot. Then reality bites. Different calibers. Different belts or drums. No spare parts. No proper mount. A heavy gun on a wet deck is not extra security. It's something you must secure, service, and explain. In the best case, it provided a brief wall of fire during a surface emergency. In the worst, it jammed or turned into dead weight when the alarm to dive came fast. Number 1. Improvised weaponry from captured materials. When you can't supply a gun, you manufacture a solution. A submarine's small arms inventory was supposed to be counted, logged, and standardized. Sidearms, a few long guns, approved ammunition. Tools were tools. Weapons were weapons. The distinction mattered because space and safety rules were written in blood. But life aboard a U-boat didn't respect tidy categories. Boarding could mean close quarters, prisoners, and sudden violence in spaces too tight for a rifle. And sometimes the problem wasn't fighting the enemy, it was controlling a moment. Crews improvised. Weighted lines and clubs from belaying pins or scrap. Knives ground from captured metal. Kashes and batons assembled from pipe and cord. Even simple restraints, rope, wire, canvas became weapons when you needed compliance without gunfire. If you took a merchant ship's gear, you didn't just take guns. You took the raw materials of force. It could work exactly as intended. Silent control during a boarding, no shots, no panic. But it could also backfire. Improvised weapons break. They injure the user. They escalate a situation you meant to contain, especially with frightened civilians. This is the least cinematic kind of weapon. It's also the most honest. Captured weapons on U-boats weren't a collector's hobby. They were a symptom of friction between regulations written for order and a war that delivered shortage, improvisation, and half-known threats. Every non-standard gun or tool solved a real problem in one moment, then created a new one in the next. Ammo, identification, training, noise. If you want World War II history without simplification or mythology, subscribe. We stay with the awkward details because that's where the real decisions lived, and where the clean stories start to fall apart.